skills and vision and political will don't step up and fight for, I think, the restoration of this country as a moral and a just society, I think we're going to be in very, very deep trouble going forward. I think 2018 is the year. Running for office, I've never done this before. It's certainly not, I would recommend it if you don't want to get outside your comfort zone, but it's very worthy. And I will say stepping out really on a very, very long limb for me, but the amount of support, the kind of passion of just ordinary Americans, Louisianians, people in the 3rd Congressional District, I have received a tremendous amount of support, and so many volunteers have gravitated to the campaign. A lot of the common wisdom is that this is not winnable for a Democrat and not for a woman, and I think we're going to surprise some people.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a little bit. It hasn't been that long since the district has been held by a Democrat, but it seems to have switched over in 2010, like a lot of districts around the country. But right now it's rated by Cook as plus 20 Republican, which is a pretty Republican district. And in fact, the past couple cycles, it doesn't seem, it seems like it's been a contest between two Republicans. So what are you seeing on the ground? What are you seeing as sort of your path to victory, and what is inspiring you to think that this could be different this year?
You probably have heard this said by other candidates because I stole it from other candidates, but Louisiana is not a red state, it's not a blue state, it's a non-voting state. So if you look at the statistics, the current incumbent for the 3rd Congressional District won his seat because 16% of the registered voters voted for him. This happens time after time. Louisiana, as you know, has an open primary. There are 7 candidates in this race right now, 2 Republicans, 4 Democrats, and a Libertarian candidate. The people that are going to get in the runoff are the ones with the most energized base. And what I'm seeing on the ground is that I have the most energized coalition of any candidate in this race. A tremendous number of women are volunteering, tremendous number of young people. And one thing that I haven't talked about is in 2014, I was appointed to sit as a state judge by the Louisiana Supreme Court. I was appointed to fill in after one of the judges passed away of a heart attack, and they needed someone to fill in until the election. So I served almost 6 months as a state judge. This comes after 26 years on the federal bench. And the things that I saw shocked me. One of the main ones was the cash bail system and the way it is run at the state level. In my view, clearly unconstitutional method of handling bail. And I think in the United States overall, 2/3 of the people in jail on any particular day are innocent people awaiting trial. And I started doing a regular check of our local jail population, and it's almost always over 50% are people who simply are waiting for trial. And the overwhelming number of these people they simply don't have the money to post bond. And so it's a discrimination against, basically criminalization of poverty. So that was in 2014. I started speaking about this issue, and because our policing is done disproportionately in poorer communities, it affects more of our poor and minority communities than any other population. I also saw this great push to keep jail beds full because crime is a revenue generator. And this is a way that we get money in Louisiana, like many other states, to run our institutions of justice. The judges Judicial Expense Fund, they get money, the DAs get money, the public defender gets money, the state police, the crime lab, the wildlife fund. There are about 15 or 20 entities that get money every time someone pleads guilty and is sentenced to pay fines and assessments. So it is a revenue stream. I've been talking about that. I've testified before the Justice Reinvestment Task Force in Louisiana about these issues. And I have very close allies in the African American community. because this has torn their community apart, especially the bail issue. People lose jobs, they lose their public assistance, and sometimes their families. So we're investing in crime, which is disproportionately impacting the African American community, and we're not investing in education. And so these are things that I see are critical moral issues. We have the money to run our systems better than this, and we just don't have the political will. So I'm way off track here, but to get back to your question, I have a lot of support in the African American community because I have been willing to speak out about this issue as an insider, as a white person, as someone who normally would not speak truth to power in this way. And they know that my heart is in this fight to invest in our communities and the potential of people on the ground, and not simply to run our institutions off a very cynical criminal justice system.
So you mentioned that there are a few other Democrats in the race, but you've been endorsed by National Indivisible. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with the local Indivisible groups and how the national endorsement came about?
Well, I did join Indivisible shortly after it was formed in Lafayette. I was not one of the people that founded it, and I have not actually attended more than probably 2 meetings, but I am involved in a lot of other groups that popped up since the 2016 election. I was a supporter of Hillary Clinton's campaign, and I went to canvass in New Hampshire for her in the winter in 2000, I think it was in February of 2016. And on election day, I was actually a poll watcher in Philadelphia and then caught a train to New York, and just by a fluke ended up with a ticket to the Javits Center and was standing probably 100 feet in front of center stage all night watching the election returns. And you can just imagine the feeling in the room as a person who had bragged about assaulting women, who had made fun of disabled reporters, who stoked racism and fear and homophobia and all the things that divide Americans, was elected president of the United States over an extremely qualified woman. So I was devastated, but looking around me in the room, it was the young people in the room that were, many of them literally on the floor and just sobbing in disbelief. And it was a game changer. We all knew it was an historic moment, that something terrible has taken place in this country. And I've told this story before. When I left, we walked out on the streets looking for a bar, and I looked down at my cell phone, and I got a text from my younger son, who was, I think, 23 or 24 at the time. And he just said, "Mom, I can only imagine how you feel right now, but just know that there will be a silver lining to this." And what happened with Indivisible, the Women's March, all the things, all the passion that we've seen of people becoming engaged in the resistance really gives me hope for this country. And I do think 2018 is an historic year. If we do not take back this country in November, I truly fear for where we're headed. When we know that Russia is aiding its administration in every way it can at keeping Americans divided against each other. And really what we're seeing is, as Americans are divided over all of these cultural issues and this us versus them mentality that is hammered at all the time by this administration, what we're seeing happen in Washington is a tremendous wealth is being transferred to billionaires and millionaires, and government being dismantled so that corporations can make even more profit. And Russian oligarchs are heavily involved in this whole thing. So we all see it every day. It's just a question of whether we can stay focused, awake, and strong enough to keep up the resistance and not just become numb to what's happening and not to let it become the new normal.
You said recently on Twitter that you were a congressional staffer and you were in the room when John Dean testified during Watergate. Can you talk a little bit about the comparison between that time and now?
I knew at that moment, because I remember sitting, I think I was there for several days. I was able to get a ticket in to watch. I mean, there was a long line of people. But I remember sitting there because Maureen Dean, I don't know if you remember her, she had this platinum blonde hair and a bun, and I was very close behind her. I knew sitting there what an historic time it was, and that I was living through history. But as other people have observed, at no time did I feel that our very institutions of democracy were potentially not up to the task. I mean, I was confident in the process that was being followed, that our institutions, that, we had checks and balances, we would get to the bottom of it. Right now, we're watching a complicit Congress that is, the GOP takes no steps to stand up to this president. And I said in a speech the other day, we have got to replace the cowards in Washington with people who have the will to stand up for American democracy. We're a constitutional democracy. Our Constitution is a moral document. It is based upon aspirations of justice and equality for everyone, and the idea that government is for the common good. And what we're seeing is Congress that will not stand up to a president who would rather attack our own intelligence officers than stand up to Putin. Our Supreme Court now, it seems to be becoming more and more partisan. This whole trend toward empowering corporations, saying corporations are people, they have free speech rights, the decimation of unions. I mean, we're seeing so many of our institutions start to serve the donor class and multinational corporations. And this, to me, is absolutely the road to destruction for the United States, both in economic terms and in terms of our democracy and our standing in the world.
Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we talk about?
The things that I am fighting for, I mean, I'm not taking PAC or corporate money. Federal candidates can't take corporate money anyway, but there's a lot of misperception about that, so I always throw that in. But I'm not taking any PAC money. Other candidates across the country are taking the same pledge. It's really going out on a limb because the incumbent, I think, at last count, has taken money from 136 PACs. It does cut into your money, and but the fact is, this race is still winnable, even if I'm outspent 10-1. It's because there are so many Americans who are awake. This is the silver lining that my son talked about. It's the fact that there are people who get up in the morning and think about, how can I help Mimi Methvin win? Can I make phone calls today? We're phone banking. Can I write postcards? Is there an event that she's showing up at? They're having events where they're wearing my T-shirts to different restaurants around the area. I've been sent photographs of women writing postcards for my campaign. They're in Metairie. That's not even my district. That's over in New Orleans. I've gotten offers of help, people who are willing to come to Louisiana to help out as the election day nears, and from far and wide. This is what America's about: is people who believe in the promise of this country and what we stand for, and are appalled at the direction that we've taken. So if anybody was asleep in 2016, and there were some of us that just assumed that things were going to move forward in a normal direction, there's a lot of people awake right now. So all I would say is, for people that are interested in my platform or more about the campaign, my website is votemini.org, and we welcome help from anywhere. I believe we're going to get into the runoff and that I'm going to be going to Washington. And I think Louisiana is going to be much better for having someone who is not just going to be a good soldier for a party or for special interests. And that's really what people are resonating to.
I love, and we'll add a link to your website on our website, but I love your volunteer form